is that religion and politics are interrelated, interdependent, and of equal importance. It is the goal of religion to declare good news to the least of these. Least of what? There are 5 things that determine the quality of life for any human being anywhere on this planet. You've got to have, first, the ability to generate income. Secondly, you've got to have the ability to get education to generate income. Third, you've got to have health care to live long enough to enjoy it. What good is it to have some money and education and you're dying of cancer or high blood pressure or diabetes? Fourth, you've got to have housing or shelter from the elements. And fifth, you've got to have justice. So if you have some income, education, health care, and housing, nobody can take it from you with impunity. That's what Jesus called the abundant life. Sister, if you have adequate income, education, health care, housing, and justice, so nobody can take those things from you with impunity, you're living on a mountain underneath a cloudless sky. And so that's what religion is all about. And guess what? Because of what I learned about the Constitution, that's what politics is all about. Politics is the process of determining who gets how much of what, when, and where in 5 areas. Every time a group of elected officials sits down, and I know from experience, 20 years in the Congress, they ask themselves 5 questions. Who's going to get the money? Whose children are going to get quality education? Who's going to get health care? Who's going to get housing? And who's going to get justice? And guess what? The people to whom I minister and the people whose challenge, whose cause we were championing, get the least income, education, health care, housing, and justice in this country, on the continent of Africa, and throughout the diaspora. And so as a minister, I want to declare good news to the people who get the least of these. The founding fathers were as smart as Jesus was in this regard. They said in the preamble of the Constitution, and I memorized it when I was a kid trying to do this speech, we the people of the United States, in order to form a more perfect union, to establish justice, to provide for the general welfare. What's the general welfare? General welfare is when everybody has sufficient income, education, health care, housing, and justice, not to bother anybody else. In fact, I've learned to love my neighbor in self-defense. I want my neighbor to have some income. You know why? If he doesn't have the income, guess whose income he's coming for? I want my neighbor to have an appreciation for education to generate income, because if he doesn't, guess whose schools he'll ruin? My children's schools. I want my neighbor to have health care, because he's my neighbor, and if he got TB, guess who's going to get it? I want my neighbor to have a house of his own, particularly when it's cold in the winter, because if he doesn't have it, and it's freezing, guess whose house he'll break into? And I want my neighbor to have justice, because if he doesn't have justice, guess who's going to feel the weight of his anger and hostility at the pain of being unjustly treated? And more important, anger leads to violence, and violence drives people mad. And I didn't want my neighborhood being an insane asylum with the inmates in charge. That is what the political process is about. Politics is designed to facilitate access to all the people to 5 things: some income, education, health care, housing, and justice. And the founding fathers said you can't have domestic tranquility if you don't have general welfare. And I can tell you, after 20 years in the Congress, as a founding member of the Congressional Black Caucus and all of that, that there are 14 functions of the federal government that determine who gets how much of what, when, and where. There's an agriculture function. There's a commerce function. There's an education function. There's a housing and urban development function. And by now you know I'm talking about the 14 cabinet-level agencies of the federal government that I learned about as a child, that have their counterparts in the standing committees of the U.S. House and Senate. And every time on the banking committee we sat down, the question was, who's going to get the money? Whose children are going to get education? Who's going to get health care? Who's going to get housing? Who's going to get justice? And quite frankly, some of my colleagues, when I would come, they said, okay, here comes the damn preacher. Because he's going to ask, how much is this going to the least of these? Because I in self-defense, I want to make sure the kids in my neighborhood get some jobs, get some income, get some education, health care, housing, and I don't want them angry with me because they've been unjustly treated. So